Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about my ACR, which I recently purchased, as you guys can probably tell. Now, the video that I released yesterday or the day before yesterday, depending on when this video actually goes up, was received very well. You guys really liked it, but a lot of you guys wanted more actual content on the gun. The reason I put up that video was I really just wanted to do a really quick, fun run-and gun with it, put a bunch of rounds through it while I'm doing my testing with it. I recently got this guy. I've only actually had access to it for about a week and a half now. We'll go into that a little bit later, but I've taken it out a couple times, so I wanted to get up a real quick run-and gun, just kind of showing you guys how it is out in the field in action, doing something pretty cool. And I just wanted to get out there and really run with it, see how fast I could go with it, because there are a lot of really nice features on this guy. But let's go ahead and get into the first part of the video, which is going to be why did I buy an ACR DMR in 2020 from Bushmaster. So first thing on this guy that you guys are probably all curious about, ooh, that's gross, is the price. So now these guys I've been looking at for quite a while. A little bit of background with me and the ACR. I have a picture in the background which is Modern Warfare 3. This has been my dream gun or dream platforms for about a decade now almost. Probably a little bit less than a decade, but I really loved the ACR in both Modern Warfare 2 and 3. I have about 30 days of playtime in Modern Warfare 3, mostly with the ACR. So I had a nostalgic or kind of childhood relationship with the gun, and I've always wanted one. And so for the last year or so since I've been into guns, I've been looking at prices, seeing how they've come up and down and that sort of thing, and followed the ACR, although from a distance, so I don't know all the ins and outs of the ACR as some guys who have been with the platform for over a decade now. But with my very limited experience, I did see that they dropped the price on the DMR versions by a huge margin. Just a few months ago, these very same rifles were selling for just under $2,000. You could probably find them for about $1,800 to $2,000. The MSRP on these guys is like $2,600, which is a crap ton of money for a platform that does not have a lot of support, and that is one of the issues with this guy. But the price on this guy, they recently dropped the price from a few different distributors who had a bunch of these laying around, I imagine. They dropped the price on a bunch of these guys down to $1,300. So I picked this guy up for $1,300, which is still very expensive. It's as expensive as a couple of my other rifles combined, but I really wanted an ACR. I've always wanted one, and I think that there is a lot of good things about the platform. We'll kind of get into that, but for $1,300 in 2020, it's a great price, and so I pretty much had to go with it, so I picked one up for $1,300. Now, I actually bought this gun early January, so like January 6th is when I purchased it, I want to say. But because of Washington's amazing rules, I had to wait 10 business days before I could actually take it home. So I had to sign for the paperwork, wait for the next day to then have 10 business days elapse. And then on the 11th business day, I can actually go and pick it up. So even though I bought this gun on the 6th, I've only recently actually gotten to take it home. So thank you, Governor Jay Inslee. So even though I haven't had a lot of time on this guy as of yet, I have put about 400 rounds through it. So the first 50 rounds or so, I was being very gentle with it. I took it out on an outing, just me and a GoPro doing some shooting with it. I zeroed the rifle, and then I did a few quick drills with it, just kind of to see how it functions with it. I cleaned it all ahead of time, so it was all cleaned and oiled. I tried to treat it really nice to kind of give it a good break-in period for the barrel. And then after that, I pretty much just went ham on it for the next video. So right about now, I have about 400 rounds through it right now, and I haven't cleaned it since I first did the shooting, because I kind of wanted just to see how it ran with putting a lot of ammo through it, or not even a lot of ammo. 400 rounds is not a lot of ammo to put through a gun without cleaning it. Some of my ARs have gone thousands of rounds without cleaning them, and they still function very well. This guy, however, after about 400 rounds, and there already are some issues, and I can see that there are definitely some build defects from Bushmaster, who actually produced this rifle, or most of the rifle. The good parts on here are pretty much all Magpul. There's a whole history of Magpul, the Magpul Masada, and then eventually giving the rights to Bushmaster to produce parts for it and sell it. But yeah, it's a long story. People who actually are into ACR guys and ACR guys who will probably click on this video will know a lot more than me, and they're a lot more knowledgeable in that regard, so we'll let them kind of set me straight in the comments. And if you need to ask questions, you can always look it up as well in the ACR forum, which I've recently joined. So basically what you get on here is you get a short stroke piston system, so it's not a DI gun like an AR. There is actually a piston in here running up against your bolt carrier group. The way it works is really good in my opinion. It's a lot, generally speaking, it's a lot cleaner than your AR, and it's going to to run much cleaner. Most of the gas and debris gets trapped up front in your piston versus back in your bolt and in your face sometimes. It does have an adjustable gas block. We'll touch on this in a minute. But it only has two settings. It only has unsuppressed and suppressed, and we'll talk about how those work on this specific rifle. So another huge advantage of the ACR is pretty much everything is perfectly ambidextrous on this guy. You have a very large monolithic rail, so it's incredibly strong one-piece design of the upper receiver. So this entire piece, all the upper receiver is one piece, looks really, really good. The machining on it is pretty much excellent. Everything on here comes apart with pins for the most part. Works really, really well. You have this handguard that just clips in and out, and it's still rock solid. This handguard is not my favorite design. We'll talk about that in a minute. It is definitely a little bit on the heavy side. You do have a quick detach barrel system here, so you just pull this out and you can remove the entire barrel. You have a lower that almost like an AR-15, but not quite, that pins in and out of place pretty easy, and it just pulls straight out. If I can get it to go out. There we go. So we have the lower receiver right here. So let's start with the lower receiver, because it's probably one of the best parts of the gun. In my opinion, it's probably the best designed lower receiver that I've ever had the pleasure of using. So first off, let's talk about one of the things that makes this rifle for $1,300 an amazing deal. You get the Geissele SSA, or what I think they call it their Super ACR trigger or something like that, but it's a two-stage trigger. So you might notice in some of the video that I'm having a little bit of issue with trigger freeze, is just because when you hit that reset on there, it's a long reset, or not a super long reset, but then you have to go back through that first stage, and then you hit the second stage where you can then fire the trigger. So it's not necessarily quite as fast as even just a basic mil-spec trigger, but the overall let-off at the end is like 2.5 pounds for a 4.5 pound total pull, I believe. Very good, very crisp. Honestly, it is the best trigger I've ever used. So even though it is a two-stage trigger that's designed for more precision type shooting, it does still work very fun in a running gun, and it is good for that once you get past the fact that you're gonna have to run through that first wall. So it is still a long trigger pull every time, because of course you have that two-stage trigger. So next thing on here, of course, we have an ambidextrous mag release, which is identical on both sides. So you have a mag release here and a mag release here. On this side, they're the exact same shape, the exact same button. So if you hand this guy to a left-handed shooter, it's going to run exactly the same. Now, the safety on here is something that I like once I get used to it, but it's a really short, kind of like little gas pedal design safety that is, again, identical on both sides. It does not get in the way of your trigger finger at all, because it is a very short, very compact design. It's very, very tight feeling. Good click, very positive. Now, one thing that's really nice also about this trigger design overall that I didn't mention is that it's kind of inset inside of this excellent polymer receiver, and so because of that, you don't have anything that can walk loose. Your trigger pins are never going to walk loose because they're sitting inside of the actual receiver itself, so of course they can't wiggle out. Now, mentioning that, this is of course a polymer receiver, which even though it is packed with features, it is still very, very lightweight. It's lighter than most of your AR-15 lowers are going to be, with a lot more features, because when you're adding a bunch of stuff of ambidextrous controls and all that stuff to an AR-15 lower receiver, you're of course adding a bunch of weight. Here they do all of that and they add all of those things, but it's still lighter than an AR-15 receiver, so that is a good thing in my opinion. The pins work pretty much exactly the same as they would on an AR-15. They're both captured and they both push out very, very clean. Now, a couple more notes of praise on the lower receiver itself is probably the most obvious thing that you saw in the video, and I'm going to show a bunch of clips of me shooting the gun so you kind of get what I'm talking about, is your bolt release. So your bolt release is again exactly the same on both sides. So if you hand this guy to a left-handed shooter versus a right-handed shooter, all of the controls are exactly the same. So your bolt release is a little tab at the front of the trigger guard that you then push down to release the bolt, or push up to hold the bolt in place. It's exactly the same on both sides. It's a very, very good design. Once you get the gun oiled up and running a little bit, it's very, very easy to change it on the fly, or to do it on the fly and do it very, very quickly. When you're doing it with an empty mag, if you're just trying it out and just trying to get some dry fire practice with it, you're going to notice that it's very, very heavy. But when you're actually running and gunning with it, you know, when you have rounds in the magazine, you're not going to have that issue. It's going to drop very, very easily. So great design on that. Easily one of the best features on this guy. But another thing that I really want to praise Magpul for this lower design is the fact that it works better with all different types of magazines that I've tested than my AR-15s do. For instance, I have a few odd magazines. So here is a Tapco magazine designed for the Smith & Wesson MMP. that will not work in a couple of my lowers. It will go in, but it will not release. It is so tight in there that it will actually not drop free and not even really go in without slamming it into place. However, in this, it's very easy, and I use this in the video, and it drops, I'm not sure if it drops, okay, it does drop free, even without any bolt pressure in there, but it works better in this guy than it does in your standard AR-15s. Now, this guy, this is an ASC magazine with a really crappy beat up follower that will not hold the bolt back in my AR-15s. The bolt will just glide over top of it all day long because the follower is a little bit damaged. But in this guy, let me go ahead and put it back in the gun for you. This guy will actually hold the bolt open on this. So what's interesting is that the magazine compatibility is actually a little bit better on the ACR than it is on a lot of your AR-15s, your standard AR-15s, and of course it held it back there. Chamber is empty, magazine's empty, rock the bolt forward, holds it in just fine. Now there might be a few magazines that I'm not aware of that don't work with the ACR, but the 8 or so different types of magazines that I've tried, 40 rounders, 30 rounders, 20 rounders, different generations of Magpul, Hex Mag, this Tapco magazine, ASC magazines, GI magazines, have all worked flawlessly and actually better in this ACR than they did in my AR-15. So one potential area that you might not like on your ACR is that one thing that they might have kind of messed up on is that they don't allow you to switch out your grips for it. So it's not like an AR-15 where you can just put in a different grip. It is actually molded into the lower receiver itself, so it is a one-piece Magpul grip. That being said, it is definitely one of my preferred grips. The angle is not super steep or super shallow, so for most people who pick it up, it's going to be just fine. And unless you're somebody who has super long hands or super small hands, you're probably not going to have an issue with it. For me, I really like it. The stippling on it, they have the little Magpul insignias on it, so it's a really good stipple job, really grippy in the hands, whether you're using gloves or not. They even have that stippling up here on the magwell, but I never touch the magwell when I'm shooting it, so generally speaking, not a big deal. Now, moving forward from there, to another area where I really think that they knocked it out of the park with this guy is that the barrel swapping on this guy, which works extremely well, takes about, oh, I should probably hold the bolt back a second. Disconnect the bolt, and the barrel just pops right out, just like that. This is, of course, because this is a DMR, this is the 18.5-inch barrel, chambered in 5.56 with a 1-in-7 twist. So this is the preferred barrel for in terms of accuracy. Now, I haven't actually done accuracy testing with this guy because I've mostly just been breaking in the barrel and kind of getting it up to a round count where I can test accuracy without it changing too much on me. But the barrel itself is very high quality. It's 3.5 pounds by itself, or 3.2 pounds, I think is what it technically is. So it is, of course, a very, very heavy profile barrel, and it is going to add one of the downsides that we're going to talk about later when it comes to this guy. And I have a bunch of guns around here with me that we're going to talk about and compare to this ACR DMR. But very, very heavy, even though it is durable and it is a good design overall. And the quick swap actually works really well. Now, when I first did it, I zeroed it at 50 yards. It's generally where I zero most of my AR-15s, is about 50 yards. And then I went ahead and did some groups, just testing how it was doing with some just range ammunition. I think it was just 223 ball from like Federal or something like that. So after I was done shooting it the first day, I think I only, like I said, I only put like 50 rounds to it the first day that I had it, kind of taking it slow with it. Then I went ahead and I took out the barrel, just kind of inspecting it, making sure everything looked good. I did clean the barrel after that, of course, with a bore snake, and everything looked really good, so I wasn't really having any issues with it. So then after that, of course, I put the barrel back in, and then when I went shooting the next time, the second time I took it out, I went ahead and tested zero again. So I shot another 3-round group at 50 yards, and lo and behold, it only shifted a very, very tiny amount low and right. So for most things within 300 yards, at least with a couple times that I've taken it on and off, it holds zero very, very well. Not perfectly, but very, very well. But again, if you're within about 300 yards, it's probably not going to make that much of a difference. Now, I will do actual testing later to see how much it shifts at longer ranges and to see if it shifts the same way each time or if there's kind of a variation there. But there is something lost in accuracy wise when you have a quick detach system, but like I said, most people with this guy with really good ammunition that the gun likes are getting around 1 MOA, which is perfectly acceptable for me and for what I'm using it for. I'm not a super precision shooter who just shoots from a bench all day, so when I'm running and gunning and doing other things like that, it's more than accurate enough for me. And the quick swap barrel is nice because I can buy a 14.5 pinned and welded setup, throw that guy in here with a different smaller profile, and now I have a much lighter gun that's a little little bit more compact and more usable in close range type stuff. But that's for a later point in time. And there will be other barrels that I'll be buying because, of course, with this quick swap barrel system, 300 black is a really good option because it's just a barrel swap and then you're running 300 black out pretty much. But yeah, there's a lot of good things that you can do with this. Now that we're done talking about the two major things, or kind of the three major things with the monolithic upper rail that I really like about this system, let's go ahead and talk about why this specific gun has some issues with its manufacturing. So back in the day, this gun was originally designed as the Magpul Masada, and then they passed off some of the rights to Bushmaster for the actual production of some of the other parts. And then it was the Bushmaster ACR, the Remington ACR at one point as well for the military contracts. There have been a lot of missteps with Bushmaster with the ACR. First off was that they originally touted it as around $1,500 MSRP. Then when it came out a couple years later after it was announced, it was at $2,500 MSRP. So they spent, so it was $1,000 more expensive than it should have been, or than what they said it was going to be. And the barrel that they came out with was, I think they only had a couple different options for barrels, but it was a 1-in-9 twist 16-inch barrel with a very odd profile to it. So it wasn't very accurate. It was like 1.5, 2 MOA accurate, was about the best you could get out of it with really good ammunition, and it only had a 1-in-9 twist rate, so it wasn't really designed for heavier, more precision loads. And for $2,500 with almost no other barrels to swap into it, it really wasn't good buy. So it pretty much just died due to lack of support. Now there are still people that love ACRs that have done a ton of stuff with them, and so there are actual custom companies that are making parts for the ACR and kind of keeping it alive through their aftermarket. Templar Precision specifically will actually ACR your barrel, so you can send them a barrel and they will actually ACR it for you to make it compatible with the quick swap and all that sort of good stuff. You can buy lots of aftermarket parts for it, but in terms of from Bushmaster, they really have dropped the ball on it, and fortunately they might actually be losing the rights to it or selling the rights to it to a different company at some point in the future. So the ACR design might actually pick back up steam if somebody can release it at a reasonable price point with a lot of good aftermarket support, and of course barrels, because one of the reasons that it died was because they really didn't have the barrel swaps for a very long time. 300 black didn't come out for like years and years afterwards, and then they slowly put out a few extra products, but really at that point it was already way too expensive for what most people wanted and what it was originally advertised as, so it really kind of died. At $2,500, you're really looking at the highest end of AR-15s, and you're also competing with B&Ts, you're also competing with SCARs, the 17s and the 16s for that price point. So at that price point, with not a lot of aftermarket support, it was a pretty bad option. And again, the only reason that I'm talking about it is because it was $1,300, and this one has a lot of really nice, expensive upgrades over your standard ACR. Now, let's go ahead and talk about something that I really hate about it. That is going to be this three-prong flash hider. It's the AAC like 78T or something like that. It's a suppressor mount, and as far as suppressor mounts go, from everything I've heard, it's not that great to begin with. It's about 80 bucks, but the worst part about it is that not that it doesn't do a good job of hiding flash. It does do that. It does do a fairly good job, but it is again an 18.5-inch barrel, so there's not much flash to begin with, but it makes the most horrible humming sound that that tuning fork sound ever. Every time you pull the trigger to dry fire it, every time you touch it against anything, it will make the most annoying high-pitched sound possible. And of course, when you're shooting it, it is just downright obnoxious, because that sound will last for 10-15 seconds after you pull the trigger. Just every time, it's just a loud, high-pitched humming sound because of the way this guy is designed. So dislike that immensely about it. Another bad thing about this, and this happens to a lot of ACRs, is that they use Rockset to put these guys on there. No idea why they do that. So I could not put enough force on there to get this muzzle brake off, or this flash hider off. Now there are some other methods to do it. You can soak it in water for a while. You can heat it up with like a blowtorch or something to try and get it off of there, but which is kind of absolutely insane to get it off. Now AAC actually makes a part to take these guys off that includes a impact gun, and I have an impact gun, but I don't have the tool on me to get rid of it, which in my opinion is just nuts. for a flash hider or a muzzle device that you can't just swap it off to something else, especially something that is, because I don't have a suppressor that mounts to this, or even a suppressor in general, this is a horrible, horrible muzzle device for an ACR. It is a technically expensive muzzle device, but it's pretty terrible for what it is. So now let's go ahead and move on to another area where I have a pretty big issue with it. That is going to be the gas block itself. So you only have two modes. It is technically an adjustable gas block for suppressed and unsuppressed. On suppressed, I did try it out on suppressed, and it was pretty much zero gas. It pretty much relies on the back pressure of the suppressor to load the next round. The bolt carrier pretty much does not move on suppressed. It won't even eject the shell. It just maybe backs out an inch or so and then right back in. So almost no gas on suppressed, which is what you want if you're running a suppressor that has a decent back pressure that's going to allow you to cycle properly. But if you're using a suppressor that doesn't have, or is a more modern design that doesn't have a lot of excess back pressure, it might not even run on suppressed, which would be really bad. Because on unsuppressed, what you have is a insane amount of gas. Now I have a lot of issues with this. So it's a very expensive gun. $1,300 is not cheap. It's mid to high end of an AR-15. And at some of the other guns, like a enhanced model, are still going for like $1,800, $1,890, $1,900, depending on where you're looking. On unsuppressed, it is almost ejecting range brass back into the chamber. So what I was using to test this with was Federal Bulk Pack 223. So this is middle of the range in terms of pressures for ammunition. It's just a 223. I think it's only rated at like 2,900 feet per second. So if I was using some of my X193 or XM193, which is a much hotter load in 5.56 at like 3,200 FPS, I've heard reports of people who have been firing this and they will have shells eject directly back into the chamber and like bend in half because of how overgassed this system is. So you'll see, and I'll put in a bunch of clips of this, it ejects at like 12:30 to 1 o'clock with range grade brass, not hot stuff whatsoever. Even with Tula, which is one of the weakest ammunitions you can get for a 223, so 55 grain Tula will shoot at about 1 to 130, which is absolutely insane. And I remember there's only two positions on this guy, so you either have no gas or an insane amount of gas. So that being said, this is a very heavy gun. In naked, without a magazine in it, it is 10.4 pounds. So with a full magazine in it, it's about 12 pounds, or a little bit under 12 pounds. With this scope and red dot, offset red dot on it, it is about 13.5 pounds, maybe a little bit heavier than that. So this is a very, very heavy gun. That should be, it's only 5.56, so you think a 12, 13.5 pound gun with 5.56 is going to have no rise, no recoil whatsoever. However, this is a 6 pound AR-15. This is a 10.5 inch AR-15 carbine length gas system on here. Now this one has been tuned by me personally, so it has a H1 buffer, it has a Strike Industries flat wire recoil spring, and it has an adjustable gas block up front. So this one here has been tuned in every way pretty much to limit the amount of gas in the system for what I'm doing with it. This will eject the same range grade brass that I was putting through my ACR at about 3 o'clock. So pretty much perfectly gassed for your standard ammunition. If you're using hotter stuff, it'll eject a little bit more forward. If you're using really cheap like Tula or stuff like that, it'll eject a little bit slower. But I want it to run pretty much everything I put through it and not have to mess with it or worry about cleaning it every single time I shoot it. So this guy here, this 6 pound AR-15 firing the exact same ammo, recoils about half as much as this 13 pound gun does. Now again, this gun is about 6, maybe a little more over 6 pounds, and this guy here is literally double its weight and recoils more, violently more. to the point where I really shouldn't be shooting it that much with how much gas is going through the system, because I don't want to be wearing out springs and bolt carrier groups so early on a gun, because replacement parts for this, of course, because it's not an AR-15, so the aftermarket is nothing like an AR-15. So replacement parts are either hard to come by or more expensive, so you don't want to be ruining those things. And now I did look online, and some people also have this same issue. Like I said, some people have had with hotter loads it ejecting directly back into the chamber. What they have done was they have turned their adjustable gas block into a true adjustable gas block by drilling and tapping the side where the actual hole is at, and then installing a pin in there or a nut that you can twist to adjust or to increase or decrease the amount of gas in there, exactly like the gas blocks that are run on all of my AR-15s and AR-10s, the Cotton Arms adjustable gas block. Great gas blocks for about $25, I think $25, $30, and I have 7 or 8 of them on different guns, and they've through about 10,000 rounds now, probably, maybe not 10,000 rounds, maybe about 7,000 or 8,000 rounds. They've been perfect, and I really haven't touched them whatsoever. So people have done that modification to their ACRs to allow them to reduce that gas flow, because the gas on unsuppressed in this specific rifle and barrel is pretty nuts, way more than it should be. It's honestly kind of a joke how much gas there is going through this system and how violent it is for a 13.5-pound gun in 5.56 running just really crappy like range grade brass that I spent like 24 cents a round on. Really should not be doing that. So one modification that I will be doing on this guy is I will be drilling and tapping it and putting in a adjustable system on here that actually works for me, so I can turn the gas on and off without worrying about this tappet up here. So like I said, this is a piston system, so it is, I believe it's their short stroke tappet system. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't know a lot about piston guns. This is my first piston gun, so people who know more, of course, you can correct and let me know in the comments. Now, I took this out before this video. This was so gummed up that I almost could not get it out. It would not slide in and out when I was trying to get rid of it. Now it will, of course, because I've already done it. But there is so much gas, or not gas, just debris and such from being so overgassed in here that it was gumming up the system after only a few hundred rounds. Very very bad in my opinion. So you definitely don't want that. If I had tried to take this to like a competition or something like that, or a class, that would have been awful, because it would have at the end of the day, it would have been pretty awful to run like that for such a heavy, expensive gun. Not something that you want to see. Everything on it comes apart really easy. It's really easy to install, reinstall, that sort of thing. This is just coated black right now for how much gas is in the system. Now, something else that I want to mention on here that I have an issue with is this is, as I mentioned, a very expensive gun. And there is so much gas coming back into the upper receiver up here, which really should not be like that with a piston gun whatsoever. It should run a lot cleaner than it is. That this upper rail, or just you have kind of a rail in here that holds your charging handle, which is ambidextrous, of course. You can swap it to either side, and I think you can get aftermarket ones that are on both sides, kind of like they are in the video games, which is pretty cool. I might end up putting one of those on here, but we'll see if I can get it to do it. It is so gritty now that I can almost get it to hold on its own pressure. So there's so much gas and gunk built up in here that I can almost, I'm not sure, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can hear that. Oh, I can almost get it. I can almost get it to hold itself back on the gunk and carbon that's built up in this area right now. So now, of course, I have to take it apart, clean it, oil it, and it should be good to go. So now let's go ahead and take apart some of this stuff on here and show you another part of the gun that I really don't like. So let's take this guy out. Once again, it should be very easy, just pops right out. And then you have this upper pin, which is, all of it just falls out on camera. That's fine, leave that in there. All right. So you have your monolithic upper receiver, just like I said, looks beautiful. The machining on it is great. It is a really thick upper receiver. And there aren't really any issues with it that I see, other than it is obviously pretty heavy, but I like the fact that it's one piece and gives you a lot of rail space that's not going to shift on you or warp or twist in any way, like you would get on some rails that can be removed. So if you're mounting iron sights or IR devices, this is a very, very secure way to do that. That being said though, due to the design and the fact that it is a piston gun, so it is actually a little bit taller than your DI guns, and the extra material around the barrel nut, you are actually going to sacrifice some weight, so this is going to be a little bit heavier than of course your standard AR-15s in terms of the upper receiver, just because there is more material here, just because of the design. So the extra weight, in my opinion, is not a big deal, but it can be an issue for some people. Now right here is your bolt and of course half of your recoil system. Now one thing that I really like about this bolt is that when it's oiled up and clean, it feels incredibly smooth. Before all the gunk was in here, it felt like butter. It was the smoothest gun I own in terms of cycling and just playing around with it. But now that it's gunked up, it definitely has a little bit more sludge to it, and it feels a little sluggish. But everything on here is really well designed in terms of bolts. Now for piston guns, most of the time the bolts are a little bit heavier. And in terms of the entire recoil system and piston system, this is slightly heavier than your standard AR-15, but not by much. So it should not recoil as much as it does, is what I'm trying to say, because there's really not that much additional weight here. The recoil system on it is somewhat anemic. You have a very tiny little rubber buffer here on the end, and of course you have this little recoil spring right here, which is stiff, but it's nowhere near as adjustable and as dynamic as you would get on an AR-15, which of course you can go with dozens of different recoil springs and many different buffers and buffer systems on there to allow you to tune the recoil impulse to whatever you want it to. Whereas with this guy here, it pretty much is what you get from the factory. Now once again, aftermarket guys can lower their bolt carriers, and I think the lightest that they've gone with their bolts is like 10 ounces or 8 ounces in some configurations. So there are ways to soften the recoil impulse on your ACR, but you're going to spend a lot of money to do it, and you're going to have somebody do custom work to it, or do custom work yourself to get it to recoil like it should. Now it should be mentioned that not all ACRs are overgassed like mine are. This only happens with some of them, and I know that ACRs used to be manufactured at a different plant, and then they got moved to this one, which is the Huntsville, Alabama plant. And this is a very low serial number. This is a 2000 series serial number, which actually sounds low, but in all actuality, it's probably not that low because not a lot of people bought these. So it sounds like it's a really low number, being in the low 2000s. It's 2221. But in terms of how many people actually bought these, it's probably not actually that low. But there are obviously some quality control issues with it, and just some major issues that I have with it in general in terms of actually firing it. Now, because it's the DMR, you get a couple different things with the DMR. You get the aluminum tri-rail here, which is short. It's like 8 inches long, which is pretty short for a rail. The standard Magpul rail is actually like 10 inches long, so it gives you a couple extra inches in there, which is very important. To have a couple extra inches, which means that if you're mounting this on bags or shooting from bags like a precision rifle, that means that extends your fulcrum point out a couple inches, because of course you don't want to be resting on the barrel itself. You want to be resting on something to keep the barrel free floated. So of course you're going to want to put it on a bag or a tripod or whatever else you're shooting from. Having a longer fulcrum point, or being able to mount it farther forward, makes for a more stable platform. Now with this very short handguard on here, it's all the way like right here. So your gas block is completely exposed, and there's just not a lot of room. So the actual ACR handguard from Magpul, it's plastic and it's probably not quite as strong, although it is a little bit lighter than this super heavy aluminum tri-rail. It comes out just past it on the lower part and then kind of slinks back behind it, so you can still obviously adjust it. So you get a couple extra inches there, which if you're shooting from bags can make a little bit of difference in terms of being easy to shoot. And there are actually some aftermarket rails. Midwest Industries, I think, makes one that's like 12 or 13 inches long. Very expensive. Expect to pay hundreds of dollars for those. So in my opinion, the tri-rail is very inadequate as a precision rifle. It's very strong and it's good for mounting things, but when you have an 18.5-inch barrel and you have a very short fulcrum point when you're putting it on bags, it makes for a less stable platform. So I actually don't like this handguard, but good news is these handguards are expensive. So you can sell this for about $100 and buy a handguard that's a little bit longer, like the standard plastic handguards, for like $80, or even like if you buy it used, like $50, and you now have a little bit lighter gun that has a longer handguard that probably works a little bit better. This is also, the rails on here are not removable. It is a one-piece design. It's very strong. It has ambidextrous sling loop points on either side. It does add a lot of weight, like I mentioned. You can actually, I believe, screw it into the upper receiver. Right here they have 2 screw holes on either side. so you can actually hard mount it to your system and make it incredibly stable, but the fact that it's so short kind of makes it useless to me, and the fact that it's really bulky, really heavy, like it's hard to wrap around this piece by itself, let alone get a really good C-clamp on the gun itself. So I'm not a huge fan of the rail design for that, but I probably will sell that, buy a thinner handguard, one of the plastic ones from Magpul, and get a lighter design that also gives me more room out front. Now, moving to the back part of it, another part that I dislike is this stock. This is the Magpul PRS stock, which is a very good stock for what it's designed for, which is precision shooting. It is adjustable, so you have this great cheek piece here that you can move up and down. You have this adjustable point from the back that you can move in very small, very precise clicks. And so there is a good amount of adjustability there. The issue is that this is 2.3 pounds by itself. The standard stock, I want to say the standard fixed stock, you can find for, again, very good prices. If you buy them used, you can find it for probably 50, 60 bucks, and they're 1.3 pounds. So you shave a pound by not going with this stock. Now, the other stock is not adjustable in terms of length of pull, although I'm a pretty small guy, so I don't need a lot of length of pull, but it is adjustable in terms of cheek piece. It does have a cheek piece that goes up like an inch or so, which is about as much as this guy goes up. So in terms of functionality, the fixed stock is a much better way to go. It's a pound lighter than this guy, and unless you're only shooting from bags, and you really just like the look of this, the other one's a better way to go. And again, you can sell this for these guys are new for like 200 bucks. So if I wanted to sell this used for like 135, maybe 150 on the high end, I could go ahead and buy the fixed stock version, save myself 100 bucks or gain an extra 100 bucks back, and I would have a lighter gun that works better for me. So even though I spent $1,300 on the ACR, I could honestly sell some components and downgrade to lighter components, more simple components, and I would save myself 100, 150 bucks. And if I wanted to sell this guy, the Geissele trigger itself, for say 175, 200 bucks, and throw in a really good mil-spec trigger, I could save another couple $100 on top of that. So what you would end up with is a gun that you really spent about $1,000 on, maybe even a little bit less than $1,000 on, that's lighter. Now, one thing that you're not going to get around with the ACR DMR is the barrel is just heavy. That being said, if the barrel's accurate, then that's no problem with me. Something that I will probably end up doing is throwing in a 14.5 pin and welded setup, not with this flash hider, but with a different flash hider on there. And you'll get a barrel that's over a pound lighter. So in total, saving a pound on the barrel, saving a pound on the stock by going with the fixed stock, and saving a tiny bit of weight going with the Magpul forend instead of this aluminum tri-wheel that's very bulky and heavy, like I mentioned before. You're going to save yourself a little bit over 2 pounds, almost 2.5 pounds, which is going to take your 10-4 weight down to 8 pounds flat naked. Now, 8 pounds flat is still heavy for an AR-15. It's very, very heavy. It's as heavy as that 16-inch that you see back there, fully kitted up with, it has lights, lasers, optic mount, all that sort of stuff, foregrip on it, a really heavy buttstock. That's an 8-pound rifle, fully kitted out like that guy is. This guy here will be naked in the same weight. Now, that being said, you are of course going to always sacrifice weight for a piston system. Generally speaking, it is always a little bit heavier, or not always a little bit heavier, but it is a little bit heavier. You're also adding weight here because you have a very good design monolithic upper receiver, which again is good. I really like it. It's a much stronger mounting platform for whatever else you're putting on it. And of course, you also have your quick swap barrel, which does add some complexity in here. So there is a lot of material right here to make sure that that mounting point is as strong as possible. Now, one thing I do want to commend them for is that even though there are some issues with this guy, most of them will be addressed. That being said, this rifle that I have disassembled in front of me, it's very easy to disassemble. It's very easy to clean, and once I fix the overgassed issue, once I fix some of the weight issues with this guy, it will be a very good gun and hopefully a very smooth running gun that I can either have my 18.5 setup or my 14.5 pin and welded setup, so both rifle length setups that work really, really well for what I want it to be. Now, like I said, I am kind of biased towards the ACR. I've always liked it since Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, so I've always really wanted to purchase one, and for 1,300 bucks, I really couldn't pass it up. That being said, 13 pounds, I did bring a bunch of guns, so I might as well show all these. 13 pounds makes this guy. This is my 16-inch AR-10, which is much more capable. This is a 1 MOA shooter, and this guy here is sitting right now at like 11 pounds. Very simple setup. It has a 13.5-inch rail on it, which is a much thinner rail, and the gas system on it is adjustable, truly adjustable, so it shoots very smooth. Works really well for a much lighter setup that's much more capable, out to 700, 800, probably even 900 yards if you're a good shot. Here is my 12.5. This is an AR-10 as well. This is a 12.5 AR-10, one of my favorite setups for a firearm / pistol. This guy here, with everything on it right now, is sitting at like 10 pounds. So again, this with everything on it is beating out this guy naked. So, and again, this is a 12.5 sub MOA or MOA with most ammo, most really good ammo that I shoot through it. It likes 168 grain Sierra Match Kings. This guy here has a lot more capabilities in terms of stopping somebody, just because it's throwing really big projectiles. I've taken this guy out to 500 yards, no problem, been very accurate. So again, within 500 yards, it's lighter. The ammunition is of course heavier, but again, you're saving 3 pounds over this guy. So that's like 3 magazines of .308 almost, that you're saving in terms of weight. So you can carry a lot of ammo for the same weight as your ACR DMR. That being said, I do still really like this ACR. Now I am of course biased to it. Like I mentioned before, it's been one of my favorite guns forever, and shooting it is still a lot of fun. Even though it is viciously overgassed, sillily overgassed I would say, it is still a very fun gun to use. Now, for its intended purpose in its 18.5-inch form, I think that it's not a bad gun for like precision shooting if you want to use 223 for matches, or if you just want something that has a really fast projectile. 18.5-inch barrel is a great length for speed out of heavier cartridges. You're definitely going to get some advantages over just a 16-inch. With a quick swap barrel, again, like you could swap into 300 Blackout, you can swap into a 14.5 pin and welded setup that saves you a pound. Now you're ready for more close quarters type stuff. You are sacrificing some weight no matter what. This design is just heavier than your standard other builds are going to be. You're never going to get around that. It is always going to be heavier than your AR-15s, even fully kitted out. This guy is just going to be heavier. Now that's not horrible, but it is just something you need to be aware of. And if you're somebody who's already kind of topping out at the edge of your weight that you want to put on your guns, then an ACR probably isn't for you. So honestly speaking, I don't really recommend the ACR, even though I do really like the platform. It's probably going to be very good when I get it completed in the form that I want. It is, like I mentioned, still going to be a little bit heavier, but it does have some advantages. When I get the piston system working properly, it should run very clean, be very reliable in pretty much any situation that I throw it in. Once I get it set up in a situation where I'm comfortable with it, I will be doing like actual reliability testing with it. I'll throw it in a river, I'll put it in mud, do that sort of stuff with it, and actually see how good it is for more of a like good to go like combat style rifle, which it was designed for. I believe these are used by one military. I think it's the Polish military use them. I might be wrong about that. I think there's one European group that actually does use these guys for their main rifle, and they love it. But as I mentioned earlier, Bushmaster might actually be getting out of the semi-auto game, which would make a lot of sense. In terms of their offerings, they don't really have anything that makes a lot of sense in the marketplace. The marketplace for AR-15s is very oversaturated, you could say. So there are a lot of companies in there, a lot of good companies, a lot of bad companies, and Bushmaster doesn't really have a value proposition. They're generally kind of like mid-range, and they're a little bit overpriced compared to some of their competitors. They're not the cheapest on the market, they're not the best on the market, and so I'm sure that their sales have not been great just because of how many good companies and bad companies are out there in the AR-15 game. And they're also owned by Freedom Group, I believe, which is also really terrible at managing guns. So hopefully the rights will pass back to Magpul, and Magpul will work with a different company to manufacture these ACRs, and will actually get really good aftermarket support, better quality craftsmanship and quality control, and see what the ACR platform can actually do. So overall, this has been a very long video, but I did want to give you guys an overview of the gun, kind of give you guys my thoughts and rationale on why I bought it and whether you should spend your money on it. I think that this is going to be a great platform. I think it's going to be a great gun once I put in a bunch of work to it. That being said, as it came from the factory, if I bought this and I wasn't planning on doing anything to it or wasn't aware of some of the issues that come with these guns, I would be very, very upset if I spent, especially if I spent like MSRP on this, 2,500 bucks, and this gun came to me like this, with the issues that it has with the gas system and the weight of the rifle. Very, very disappointing in those regards. But at 1,300 bucks for a gun that I have a personal bias towards, and especially with what I plan to do with it in the future, I'm very, very happy with it. Like I said, it's still a ton of fun to go shooting with it, but I am going to have to do some modifications to kind of bring it up to what it should be for a modern, expensive battle rifle. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. ACR guys, if you're watching, just let me know what you guys think of the description down below, what I should be doing to it, what you guys have done to it, and yeah, anything like that would be very, very appreciated. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.
4 out of 6, nice job.
Well, that's all she wrote, so.
That was awful.